So thank you very much. There are actually three of us that have worked on this presentation. Our colleague from Albania, Medler Mema, could not be with us, but we miss him and appreciate his contribution. I'm going to speak really fast and go through these slides really fast so I can give Hans a little more time. So in the allegory of the cave by Plato, Plato uses this as an explanation for education, how to educate the rulers of his utopian society, but we can apply this in many ways to our own situation. You'll notice that in this particular allegory, there are people chained to a wall who grew up. This is an allegory, of course, it's not real, but chained to a wall, and all they can see in front of them is shadows. And for them, having been chained there their whole life, this is their reality. This is what they believe is real, even though it's obviously not from those of us that can see from a different perspective. In our application, the application I'd like to make today, I would suggest that all of us have shadows of caves in our lives. All of us have inherited cultural traditions from well-meaning parents, neighbors, church members, states, whatever. But all of us have accepted cultural shadows that we accept sometimes as true. My goal in life is to get rid of all of my cave shadows. I'm going to die before that happens, but my goal is to keep working to get rid of the shadows in the caves. But it's sort of a dangerous prospect to move out of the cave and actually understand that some of the traditions I received from my beloved parents may not be exactly true. For instance, my parents, being good people from Utah, taught me as a youth that everything in Utah was the best and greatest of all things in the world, and the tabernacle was the greatest building in the world. I learned in France that maybe 13th century Gothic cathedrals might match the tabernacle. Now, Richard Rodriguez helps us understand why this can be so painful. However, he says as we get out of our caves, essentially what he's going to say here is that there is a sense of disloyalty sometimes that grows in us towards the people that we love. Not because we don't love each other, but because there's a distance. He was a Spanish-speaking Hispanic boy that went to Anglo schools in California, and as he began to excel in English and English literature, the nuns that taught him praised him. He kept going in the literature, and he kept getting better and better and better in English. And he says this, starting from about right here: for my part, I felt that I had somehow committed a sin of betrayal by learning English. I knew that my parents had encouraged me to learn English, but once I spoke English with ease, I came to feel guilty. I felt that I had shattered the intimate bond that had once held the family close. This original sin against my family told whenever anyone addressed me in Spanish, and I responded confounded. It wasn't that they didn't love each other, it's that their worlds were separating. And there was not much he could do about it, because his world, they could never come into his world. He could go back into theirs, they couldn't come into his. So how do we relate this to Europe and the gospel? And the answer is this: read really fast, because I'm going to move fast. When we baptize people into the church, we baptize them on some level out of their culture. And that's true in the United States, that's true in Europe, that's true in China and all over the world. But we ask them to accept some rather unique doctrines, demanding ethical standards, new ordinances, new religious expectations like a Sunday dress code and working in a church, for heaven's sakes. And so most members, or many members, accept these potential costs because they recognize the benefits to the membership and the blessings of the Lord. But what I'm going to suggest to us today is that we do not add unnecessary cultural challenges to them that are not actually part of the gospel of Christ. So, pervasive American and Mormon cultural region perspectives within the church, though historically understandable, make conversion and retention more difficult. Inherited political parties, economic philosophies, patriotic expressions, artistic sensibilities, leisure time hobbies and activities, and perceptions of polite behavior do not necessarily equate with the pure core gospel of Jesus Christ. This particular picture is a picture of Mars Hill in Athens. This is sort of a symbol of Paul's ability to get past his Jewish culture and preached the gospel of Christ to the Gentiles. And therefore he was the apostle to the Gentiles. But we learned that the early church, the early New Testament church, struggled to move past its Jewishness. And even Peter, after he receives a revelation that the Gentiles don't have to live the law of Moses, after he sends out the first presidency letter to the church that Gentiles don't have to live the law of Moses, still, you remember in Galatians 2, Paul sort of gets after Peter for moving back to his Jewish roots somewhat, and sort of snubbing the Gentiles there at a meeting. And so we recognize that the Judaizer problem is a problem all the way through the Christian church, and it's compounded by the fact that the early church is part of the Roman Empire. It's the church of God in the Roman Empire. And while this is useful, sort of like the church being established in America, which provides order and good roads for missionary work and those kinds of things, nonetheless there's some downsides. So because the church, the New Testament church, was treated as a Jewish sect, they executed its founder and many of the apostles that followed Jesus because he was seen as disloyal. Remember, he was accused of being a treason in the Roman trials. And then the irony is that over time, the early Christian church actually Romanizes and adopts much of the Roman culture and sort of conflates Christianity and becomes a Roman Catholic church. And that's not all bad. It just has its downsides as well. Now, our own history would suggest this. The modern church still faces this double-edged dilemma. It must take a pure gospel to the rest of the world, and it must adhere to